A person who calls someone else foolish clearly suffers throughout his life. He makes many mistakes and runs into all sorts of problems. The wise person generally manages to get by without too much trouble. But the shrewd individual benefits enormously. He sees things that others don't notice, and because of that he achieves far greater success, financially, socially, and even in his family life and in raising children. However, contrary to the simplistic way we usually think, if you asked most people to define a foolish person, a wise person, and a shrewd person, they'd answer by looking at someone's IQ score and saying, that determines whether he's smart, foolish, or shrewd. King Solomon, with all his wisdom, tells us that it's not like that. The definitions he gives are completely different, and he teaches that every person has within him the potential to reach the highest levels of wisdom and shrewdness, and how to avoid falling into the category of the foolish. Let us turn to Solomon's words in Proverbs, chapter 10, verses 7 and 8. The first verse reads, "The way of the fool is right in his own eyes, but a man who listens to counsel is wise." We'll explain the second verse in a moment. It says, "He who heeds reproof shows himself prudent." In Hebrew, prudent is derived from the same root as crafty or shrewd, avium, as in, "And the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field." Genesis 3:1. Here, crafty does not have a negative connotation. Rather, it means someone who is perceptive, who sees and understands things that others miss. Solomon begins, "The way of the fool is right in his own eyes." That is, you see someone who's certain of himself, convinced that he knows everything and that no one has anything to teach him. I know the correct way. Whatever I do is the most right and accurate, he thinks. The king calls such a person a fool, someone whose path always seems right to him, regardless of what he does. He believes, I'm always correct. In reality, there is a straight path that leads to good outcomes, and there is a crooked, winding path that leads to bad ones. There's even a path that appears straight, but is in fact the opposite. So Solomon says, this is what characterizes the fool. He follows his desires, his impulses, whatever pops into his mind, without any self-criticism. Even if someone points out his mistake, he insists that everyone else is wrong. Such a person is a fool whose way is right in his own eyes. Next, but a man who listens to counsel is wise. Here Solomon defines wise as someone one step above foolish, but below shrewd. A wise person listens to advice. He is aware of his own shortcomings. He understands, I'm not a genius, I don't know everything. Even if he has high IQ, meaning he might be intelligent or sharp, he can still have character flaws that lead him astray. Perhaps he was born with certain weaknesses, or he learned bad habits from others. Those personal inclinations cause mistakes. For example, someone might offer you a business deal that could earn you a lot of money, but because of a slight offense, he said something that hurt me. You refuse to do business with him. You think, I'll go work for someone else, but that move will actually cost you more than you realize. You see how the person's personal sensitivity, his inability to let go of a perceived insult, causes him to make bad financial decisions. The same applies in marriage. If someone has personal sensitivities, he'll believe he's always right when he lashes out in anger or in the way he treats his spouse because of that underlying sensitivity. He doesn't realize how badly he's acting, even when people offer him constructive advice. Parents might say, make peace with your wife, go to her halfway, talk it out, apologize. A wise person listens to such guidance. Finally, Solomon speaks of the prudent or shrewd, the highest level. He who heeds instruction is shrewd. The shrewd person is sharp and discerning, someone who understands things at a level far above the mere wise person. He not only recognizes his own blind spots, but also notices subtleties and nuance in every situation. Because of that, he can navigate life with even greater success. In summary, 1. Fool. Believes his way is always right, follows impulse, lacks self-awareness. 2. Wise. Acknowledges his own limitations, listens to good advice, corrects his missteps. 3. Shrewd. Goes beyond wisdom by seeing hidden factors that others miss, anticipates outcomes, profits in every area of life. Solomon teaches that anyone can ascend from foolishness to wisdom and then to shrewdness, provided he cultivates the right habits and remains open to correction. There are people who never listen to advice. They're convinced they're always right. That's why King Solomon teaches that the true definition of a fool has nothing to do with IQ or academic intelligence. It's not about how smart you are on paper. It's about the outcome of your behavior. A person might be intellectually brilliant, yet in practice behave like a fool. Why? Because his personal biases, ego, and desires take the steering wheel in his life. They override his logic and values and eventually drive him to a low place, both morally and emotionally. In the next verse in Proverbs, Solomon gives us a powerful example. A fool vents his anger on the same day he is offended, meaning someone insults or offends him, and that very day his rage is unleashed. He yells, shouts, tells everyone what happened. He can't hold it in. And so everyone around him knows there was a conflict. Now you might ask, why does Solomon call this person a fool? Isn't he just someone with an anger issue or poor emotional control? But King Solomon explains, a person who cannot control their anger is foolish. Why? Let's look at the opposite case. The verse continues, but the wise one stays quiet and covers the shame. Here, wise refers to someone who's shrewd. He's thoughtful and forward-thinking. He doesn't suppress his pain forever, but he knows how to pause, how to wait for the right moment to respond with wisdom rather than impulse. That's true strength. That's real intelligence. But again, the question is, aren't these just character traits? Isn't this about emotional control, not wisdom or foolishness? Not necessarily, because even a genius, if he lacks self-control, can behave like a fool, and that has consequences. Let's bring it down to real life. Imagine someone at work is insulted. His manager says, "You're unreliable." Honestly, I think you're foolish. If it were up to me, I'd fire you. That person is deeply hurt, and he comes home furious. He unloads all that rage on his spouse. You know what happened at work today? The boss said I'm unreliable, that I'm stupid, that he'd fire me if he could. And he thinks he's venting to feel better. But what he doesn't realize is that by saying, "My boss says I can't be trusted," his spouse might be thinking, you know, I've also seen signs that maybe I can't fully trust him either. And when he repeats that the boss called him foolish, she might quietly think, he's not completely wrong. This is how someone, by trying to defend himself emotionally, actually harms his own image, not just at work, but also in his closest relationships. And when a person explodes in public, when he screams in front of everyone about an insult, he's amplifying the damage. Let's say a colleague tells someone, "You're a fraud, a liar," and the person immediately blows up, yelling, cursing, causing a scene. What happens? Now everyone around hears about the accusation. Until then, only one person thought he was a fraud. Now, 10 more are asking, wait, maybe there's some truth to it? He thought he was defending himself, but all he did was spread the suspicion even further. In contrast, someone who keeps calm, who can delay his response until a moment of clarity and peace, can speak up wisely later that day or the next with perspective. This is not the same as letting people trample you. Judaism doesn't preach passivity. It doesn't ask you to be a doormat. Judaism teaches, if someone rises to kill you, rise first and defend yourself. Yes, protect yourself, but that doesn't mean you have to fight every battle, every insult, every offense in the heat of the moment. Sometimes it's wiser to wait, let things cool down. Then you can speak clearly, maybe talk it out, understand the other person's motives, say what's bothering you and listen to what bothers them. That's how real peace is built. King Solomon defines the fool as someone who reacts instantly, with rage, with shouting. His anger becomes public, and in the process he destroys his own credibility, dignity, and relationships. The wise person knows how to hold back, to process, to respond, not just react. Sometimes a person comes home from work upset, boiling with anger. He tells his wife, "My boss said I'm unreliable, that I'm foolish, that if he could, he'd fire me today." He thinks he's venting, getting it off his chest, but he doesn't realize what he's really doing. His wife hears this and starts thinking to herself, "You know, maybe the boss is right. I've also seen times when I couldn't fully count on him. Maybe he really isn't thinking things through." What has he accomplished? Nothing but more damage. That's why King Solomon teaches, he who conceals shame is a prudent man. The one who keeps quiet in the moment, who holds back from reacting immediately to an insult or humiliation. He's not just someone with self-control or emotional intelligence. He's a wise strategist. He's thinking about the next step, about the consequences. This applies to marriage as well. A wife might say something deeply hurtful to her husband, or the other way around. It happens, but sometimes the smart move is to say to yourself, "Now is not the time to respond. I'll cover the shame for now. I'll put a lid on it." The issue is there, yes, but not everything needs to be handled in the heat of the moment. Later, in a calm setting, we'll talk it through. It's the same with parenting. Sometimes a child does something that shocks their parents. They can't believe it. When I was 10 or 15, I'd never have dreamed of doing something like this. And out of love, real deep love, the parents may lash out. They want to correct the child, to help them, but they end up humiliating him, exposing everything at once. Rabbi Aharon Leib Steinman of blessed memory, one of the greatest sages of our generation who lived past 100, was once asked about such situations. His response was brilliant in its simplicity. He said, "You don't always have to show a child that you saw what he did. Because if he knows you saw it, you have to respond. But sometimes it's wiser to act like you didn't notice. That way, the child doesn't feel ashamed. He doesn't feel like a failure. He doesn't develop a defensive mindset. But as a parent, you still noticed. You still saw the mistake. You just chose a better moment to teach. For example, let's say you quietly witness your son taking money from your wallet without permission. If he realizes you saw him, he'll want to bury himself in embarrassment. Instead, you quietly walk away, saying nothing. You're not ignoring it. You're choosing the right time. Maybe during the family's Shabbat meal, you bring up a teaching about how important it is to respect other people's property, about the spiritual and moral weight of taking something that isn't yours. You speak calmly. The child hears the message. Maybe he gets the hint, maybe he doesn't. But either way, he received the guidance without being shamed or broken. There was once a head of a yeshiva who told Rabbi Steinman that on his way to the school, he saw some of the students acting improperly. He approached them and told them their behavior wasn't acceptable, and then felt unsure whether he had handled it correctly. Rabbi Steinman's guidance, as always, reflected deep wisdom and emotional sensitivity, because in life, especially in parenting, marriage, and leadership, Wisdom isn't just about what you see or what you know. It's about what you choose to say and when you choose to say it. Solomon didn't just speak in poetic proverbs. He gave us a blueprint for building healthy relationships. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is say nothing at all until the right time. One time, a yeshiva dean came to consult with Rabbi Aharon Leib Steinman. May the memory of the righteous be a blessing, one of the leading Torah sages of our generation. The dean explained that on his way to the yeshiva that morning, he saw 3 of his students, boys from a yeshiva ktana, a high school-aged yeshiva, standing outside and smoking cigarettes. This was clearly against the yeshiva's code of conduct, as smoking was strictly prohibited for younger students. So he approached them and rebuked them. But when he told this to Rabbi Steinman, the rabbi simply asked, "Why did you see it?" Confused, the dean replied, "What do you mean? Why did I see it? I was walking by. They were right there in front of me." And Rabbi Steinman answered, "Yes, but once you saw it, now you have to respond. In cases like this, it would have been better if you hadn't seen it," meaning you should have acted as if you didn't. His point: in education, especially with teens or children, you need foresight. You need to think one step ahead. What will be the result of my words? What impact will my reaction have, not just today, but long term? This is aligned with King Solomon's famous teaching. Train a child according to his way. Even when he grows old, he will not turn from it. Proverbs 22:6. The Vilna Gaon asks, why does the verse say, according to his way? Shouldn't it say, according to your way, your mature, experienced, responsible way? And the answer, each child is different. Each child has his own personality, sensitivities, and emotional wiring. You must educate the child in a way that suits his character, not just your ideals. There are children who need a gentler approach. Others respond better to a more direct style. Some need encouragement from the side. Others need structured rules. Effective parenting is personalized. That's why before a parent criticizes or rebukes their child, they should first pause and ask themselves, will this approach help the child grow in the right direction, or am I just venting my frustration? The great educator, Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe, may the memory of the righteous be a blessing, known as the elder of the spiritual mentors, said it beautifully. He was a revered mashgiach, spiritual guide, in the yeshiva world. A mashgiach doesn't teach Talmud, but he gives talks on ethics and personal development, advises students, and guides their emotional and spiritual growth. In his Sefer Alei Shur, Rabbi Wolbe wrote, "A child is like a spring. The more you press down on it, the farther it will fly when released." In other words, don't suffocate a child. Don't overpress. It's okay to rebuke. It's okay to guide firmly, but not in a way that creates long-term pressure or resentment. Otherwise, the moment that child has the freedom to act independently, he'll run the opposite way from everything you tried to teach him. Imagine a father who insists that his 8-year-old son come with him to synagogue every Friday night. He forces him week after week. The child resists, doesn't enjoy it, but the father insists. One day, when the boy gets older and has the freedom to choose, what will happen? He may reject the entire experience, not because of what synagogue means, but because of how it was forced on him. That's not education. That's pressure, and pressure bursts pipes. True education is about timing. It's about patience. It's about knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. Sometimes the greatest guidance is not in what we say, but in how we wait to say it and how we understand who we're saying it to. Imagine a father on Friday night getting ready to go to synagogue. His 8-year-old son is in the middle of a game and doesn't want to come. The father insists, raises his voice, "You have to come." I said, "Now, The child reluctantly drops his game, comes along, but inside resentment is building. You may have gotten him to the synagogue tonight, but what happens when he's 15? He might not even want to look at a synagogue. You pushed him so hard, you ended up achieving the opposite of what you wanted. So what's the alternative? Try something like this. I'd really love for you to come to synagogue with me. We'll sing Lechadodi together. And if he says, Dad, I'm playing now, you respond, okay, how much longer do you think you'll play? 10, 15 minutes? Great. When you're done, I'll already be heading out. Join me when you're ready. You've given him space. You've given him respect. You've given him ownership of the choice. And the reward? When that child grows up, he'll love synagogue. He'll associate it with warmth, not pressure, joy, not resentment. This is a powerful principle in education, what King Solomon calls, train a child according to his way, and even when he grows old, he won't stray from it. The Vilna Gaon asked an insightful question. Why does the verse say, his way, the child's way, and not your way, the parent's? After all, the parent is the adult, with life experience and moral clarity. Shouldn't the child be trained according to what the parent knows is right? The answer, every child is different. Every child has a unique temperament, emotional sensitivity, and learning style. Some kids need gentle encouragement. Others respond better to firmness. Some require directness. Others need subtlety. The key is not one size fits all. It's knowing your child. And when you're about to correct or rebuke your child, pause and ask yourself, is this moment about helping my child grow, or am I just venting my frustration? Because if it's just about blowing off steam, you might actually push the child in the opposite direction. Rav Shlomo Wolbe, may the memory of the righteous be a blessing, one of the great spiritual educators of our time, said something beautiful. A child is like a spring. The more you press it down, the farther it will fly when released. You can and should guide. You can even rebuke. But if you apply too much pressure, if you suffocate rather than support, don't be surprised when, the moment they're free, they run from everything you tried to teach. True strength as a parent or educator is knowing when not to respond. Sometimes the wisest reaction is silence, or waiting for the right moment. That's what King Solomon calls being shrewd, not based on IQ, but on self-mastery. A fool lets out all his anger immediately, but a wise person holds it in and thinks ahead. Solomon uses the word fool in two contexts. The fool who always thinks he's right. The way of the fool is right in his own eyes. The fool who has no self-control, who explodes in anger the moment something happens. Both fall under the same label, a person driven by ego, not clarity. And the wise person? It's the one who listens to advice. Who knows? I don't know everything. I need perspective. I need to hear from those with more experience. Today, many young people grow up in a world where they feel like they know more than their parents. After all, they're tech savvy. They can operate AI and navigate the internet far better than most adults. And it's true, they can click faster, code smarter, run apps and devices with ease. But life experience can't be downloaded. You can't Google emotional maturity, and you can't shortcut wisdom. That's why King Solomon's words still ring true. The sages in the Midrash bring two historical figures as examples. The way of the fool is right in his eyes. That was Samson, who insisted on marrying a Philistine woman because, in his words, she is right in my eyes. His parents tried to dissuade him, but he wouldn't listen. The wise man listens to advice. That was Jacob, who obeyed his father and mother when they told him, "Do not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan." He trusted their guidance. One chose based on impulse. The other chose based on wisdom. And that's the heart of the message. You want your child to grow up loving the values you cherish. Don't force them. Don't shout them into submission. Model those values. Teach with patience. Guide with heart. And when they grow old, they won't just remember your words. They'll live by them. This story takes us back to a time before the giving of the Torah, when the laws of who could or couldn't marry whom were not yet formally established for the people of Israel. And yet, values and wisdom already guided the choices of our forefathers. When Samson, the mighty judge and warrior, saw a Philistine woman he wanted to marry, he told his parents, "Get her for me, for she is pleasing in my eyes." His parents cautioned him. They tried to explain, "She's not right for you. Her culture, her values, they don't align with your mission. She comes from a place steeped in idolatry and foreign practices." But Samson wouldn't listen. He insisted. In the end, she betrayed him, cut his hair, stripped him of his strength, handed him over to his enemies. He lost his vision and eventually his life. That's what happens when a person refuses to listen to the people who care for them. Contrast that with Jacob, our forefather. He too was a grown man. He could have said, "I'm old enough to choose my own wife. Why should I leave my homeland and travel all the way to Mesopotamia?" But when his parents told him, "Don't take a wife from the Canaanite women here. Go to your uncle Laban's house," he listened. He followed their advice, and he was blessed for it for the rest of his life. That's the lesson King Solomon teaches. The way of the fool is right in his own eyes, but a wise man listens to advice. It's easy to feel confident when we're driven by desire or ego, but that doesn't mean we're seeing clearly. A wise person knows that seeking guidance is not a weakness, it's a sign of strength. And this idea applies especially in the area of marriage and relationships. Every couple goes through tension. It's normal. Two people come from different backgrounds, different habits, different expectations. When the tension repeats itself, it can start to create real emotional distance. Often, someone suggests, "Let's get help. Let's go to couples counseling." In many cases, the wife is ready. She's open to trying, but the husband resists. He might feel, "Why should I let someone tell me how to live? I'm not broken. I know how to run a business. I'm successful. I'm smart." Or, "I don't want to expose my flaws to a stranger." Or simply, "I'm fine. It's her problem." But here's the truth. That's a dangerous mistake. I've seen cases where the wife was still willing to work on the marriage, but the husband's stubbornness dragged things on until it was too late. By the time he agreed to seek help, the emotional connection was already gone. She had shut down completely. The pain had built up beyond repair. Why? Because he refused to listen to advice. You can be brilliant in your field. You might have a high IQ. You may be respected at work. But relationships are a different skill set. And when it comes to love, emotional safety, communication, and forgiveness, you need guidance. Don't wait until everything crumbles. Be wise. Seek counsel early. And one more crucial point. When seeking counseling, it matters who you go to. Not every therapist or advisor understands the values of a faith-based relationship. There have been cases where a woman went to ask for help in improving her marriage, and the counselor told her, "Why do you need him? Just divorce him." That's not always the right path. Sometimes it is. But a blanket recommendation to break a marriage without exploring the emotional, spiritual, and practical realities is irresponsible. That's why it's so important to seek out a Torah-aligned marriage counselor, someone with genuine credentials and proven experience, but also someone who understands your values, a professional who believes in the sanctity of marriage and knows when to help couples reconnect, not just split up. So what's the takeaway? Being wise isn't about how much you know. It's about knowing when to listen. And sometimes the greatest wisdom is knowing you don't have all the answers and being humble enough to ask for help. It's simply not true that most of the world is divorced, even though that's often the atmosphere we live in. That's why it's so important to turn to someone with true values, someone who lives with awe of God, who understands just how precious peace in the home is in the eyes of the Creator. The tears of children whose parents go through divorce, those tears are real. We've seen homes that were once warm and stable, with wonderful, successful children, suddenly fall apart after divorce. The children suffer emotionally. Their grades drop. Some lose their way entirely. Of course, there are situations where divorce is unavoidable, and in those cases, it's a necessary step. But in the majority of divorces, the truth is, they could have been prevented. If only the couple had chosen to act earlier, with more humility and with more wisdom. If only they had been willing to seek guidance, to lower the ego just enough to receive help. In the Complete Guide to a Happy Marriage, we share a simple tip that many couples have used with great success. We've mentioned it before, but it's so effective, it's worth repeating. When there's ongoing tension in the marriage, sit down, just the two of you, like two adults. No phones, no distractions, maybe with a cup of coffee and a couple of cookies. And each partner says to the other, write down 3 things you'd like me to work on. 3 areas where you feel I should change. Why 3? Because just like a tree has leaves and roots, the daily arguments are the leaves. You can't address every leaf individually, but if you work on the roots, you begin to fix the entire tree. So each partner writes down 3 areas that feel critical to them, not small annoyances, but the big things that deeply affect their happiness and security in the relationship. Now comes the important part. Once you exchange those lists, you don't debate them. Even if you think your spouse is exaggerating, or misinterpreting, or just plain wrong, that doesn't matter. The fact that they wrote it means it's real for them, it matters to them, and that's enough. Let's say she writes, stop raising your voice at me. And he says, but I don't raise my voice, I speak calmly. Maybe in his mind, he is calm, but perhaps the tone is too harsh, or his physical presence feels intimidating, or he doesn't realize how his words come across. It doesn't matter whether he thinks it's true. What matters is that she feels it. That's reason enough to work on it. Same with her. If he lists 3 things that matter deeply to him, she should begin working on them, even if she doesn't fully agree, because each partner is saying, this is what I need to feel safe and loved. And when both sides are genuinely trying to change, even imperfectly, the other person notices. That sparks motivation, that creates hope, that brings joy. Slowly but surely, they move onto the path of healing, a path toward peace in the home. Compare that with the pain of divorce, children crying, court battles, custody arrangements, expensive attorneys, cold conversations in family court, endless emotional stress. The pain of losing your family structure is far greater than the discomfort of making a few personal sacrifices. Let go of the ego, let go of the I'm always right. Make the effort, it's worth it. That's why King Solomon says, he who listens to advice is wise. And notice, he doesn't say he who listens to the advice of a wise man. He simply says, he who listens to advice. That's it. If you're willing to open your heart, to accept direction, to admit that you don't always see the full picture, you are wise. Listening doesn't make you weak. Listening makes you strong. And in a marriage, listening can be the difference between rebuilding and falling apart. A truly wise person knows how to listen, not just to people around him, but to those with experience, with depth, with real understanding. When you open yourself up to outside wisdom, you gain everything. This principle is reflected in 2 verses from the Book of Proverbs. At first glance, they read like everyday life lessons. The way of the fool is right in his own eyes, but the wise person listens to advice. On the surface, it sounds like Solomon is just talking about practical life, and he is. But in the deeper layer, like many proverbs, it's really about something much greater, the spiritual path of a person's life. Let's break it down. Every human being enters the world with desires, impulses, and temptations. That's just human nature. But what happens when someone refuses to receive guidance, when they ignore the spiritual manufacturer's instructions? That's the person Solomon calls a fool. Why? Because he's not being guided by clarity or values. He's being driven by impulse and instinct. He thinks, I know what I'm doing. But little by little, the path he's on begins to unravel. Sure, in the beginning, it might feel liberating. No rules, no limits, just living however you want. But eventually, things fall apart. Relationships suffer. Inner peace disappears. The road he thought was leading him to happiness ends in frustration and pain. Contrast that with someone who listens to advice, not just from other people, but from the Creator himself, the one who built us and understands how we function. That person is truly wise. Here's an analogy. Imagine a man in his 60s living in a rural town. His knees are giving him trouble and the hills are hard to climb. So he saves for years and finally buys a high-quality ATV, all-terrain vehicle, to help him navigate the rough terrain. It comes with a detailed instruction manual. Every button, every setting, every warning is explained. One section says, if you hear a long, sharp beep, it means the engine is overheating. Stop immediately, turn off the vehicle, and let it cool for 10 minutes before continuing. He drives it for weeks and loves it. But one day he's in a rush and hears that exact warning sound. And he thinks, no one tells me what to do. I paid for this. The manufacturer doesn't own me. So he ignores the warning and keeps going. What happens? The engine breaks. Total failure. Why? Not because the machine is faulty, but because he refused to listen to the one who built it. That, says Solomon, is what a fool looks like. The wise person, on the other hand, listens to the manufacturer, in this case, our Creator. If God, the one who formed our body, mind, and soul, says, 6 days you shall work, but on the 7th day, rest, then that's not just a religious obligation. It's good for you. It's part of your design. It might require changing habits, but if you trust the source, you'll benefit in this world and the next. Or take the commandment to maintain physical boundaries before marriage. It's not easy, but those who take it seriously often testify how it positively impacts the trust, respect, and strength in their future marriage. The Torah's guidance isn't random. It's rooted in wisdom, psychological health, and human dignity. And what if you're unsure? What if you're saying, I'm not even convinced the Torah is true? Who says this guidance is really from God? That's okay, but then go find out. That too is part of listening to advice. Don't live your entire life with spiritual uncertainty. Explore, learn, investigate. There are intelligent, compelling, logical answers to life's deepest questions, if you're willing to seek them. I remember once attending a seminar on Jewish wisdom and faith. During one of the breaks, a highly educated man approached the speaker. He had a PhD, was well-spoken and articulate, and described himself as a proud atheist. But something about what he heard made him pause. Because in the end, being wise doesn't mean you never had doubts. It means you don't ignore them. You're willing to challenge yourself, to hear a different perspective, to listen to advice. That's the foundation of growth, So whether it's about marriage, parenting, purpose, or faith, remember the timeless words of King Solomon: "The fool is always right in his own eyes, but the wise person, he listens to advice." And that's what makes him truly wise. He told me, "I'm open to listening. That's why I came to this seminar. I want to learn. I want to understand." But then he added, "I don't believe there's a creator because I've never seen him. I only believe in what I can see." I told him, when dealing with big questions, questions like, is there a creator? Did he give a divine code? Is there life after death? You have to approach them not like a lawyer, but like a judge. What's the difference? Both lawyers and judges hear the same testimony, the same evidence, the same arguments, but only one of them is looking for the truth. Have you ever seen a defense attorney, mid-trial, stand up and say, "Your Honor, I've changed my mind. My client, the one I've been defending this whole time, is guilty. Please send him to jail"? That's never happened in the history of law. Why? Because the lawyer's job isn't to find the truth. It's to defend his client, no matter what. The judge, on the other hand, has one mission: seek the truth, follow the evidence wherever it leads. I gave him this analogy. Years ago, there was a famous professional soccer player in Israel. At the height of his career, he was making a fortune and living the dream. But like many people who have it all, he started seeking new thrills. He had some old friends from the neighborhood, guys who weren't doing so well. One day they invited him to join them in breaking into a building, just for the thrill. He didn't need the money, but he agreed, for the excitement. Later, the group was caught. The police had some clues pointing in his direction. Not enough for a conviction, but enough to question him. He denied everything. "Are you serious? I'm a public figure, a professional athlete. You think I broke in somewhere? That's insane." He hired the top criminal defense attorney in the country. She defended him fiercely, saying, "There's no way someone like him would do something like this." But after many rounds of questioning, he broke emotionally. He pulled his lawyer aside and confessed, "I'm telling you now, just between us, I did it. Please talk to them. Work out some kind of deal. I can't keep doing this." And she looked him in the eyes and said, "No, you didn't. I don't believe you." He said, but I'm telling you I did." And she repeated, "I'm telling you, you didn't." She went back into court, continued defending him, and got him acquitted. To this day, no one knows what really happened. That's what lawyers do. They protect a position. They're not there for truth. That's not their job. So I told him, if you're here just to defend your lifestyle because you like doing whatever you want on weekends or don't want to feel obligated to follow religious guidelines, then there's no point in having a real conversation. You're not looking for truth. You're looking to justify a decision you've already made. But if you're here like a judge, open to wherever the evidence leads, then let's talk. He nodded and said, "I actually do want to explore this honestly." So we started talking. He was intelligent, thoughtful. He told me he doesn't believe in God because he's never seen him and only trusts what's rational and observable. I said, "Fair enough. But you're a man of science. You see the complexity of nature, the precision of biology, the harmony of the universe. Doesn't that fill you with wonder?" And he admitted, "It does actually. It really does." So I said, "Good. Let's put aside the word God for a minute. Just look at the world with clear, rational eyes. The design, the detail, the balance. Does it really make sense that all of this came from nowhere? That it has no cause, no purpose, just random?" That was the beginning of a very deep conversation, because the first step to truth isn't having all the answers. It's being willing to ask the right questions. not as a lawyer trying to win a case, but as a judge, genuinely seeking what's real. So I said to him, let's put aside for a moment the word God. Let's just look at the world, at human biology, at nature, at the mind-blowing design of creation. There are really only two possibilities. Everything was intentionally designed by an intelligent creator. Everything evolved randomly after the Big Bang, from lifeless matter to living organisms, pure chance, no guiding mind. Now here's the thing, even modern science still has no explanation for how life came from non-life. If you remove God from the picture, there's no current scientific model that explains how inanimate matter became a living cell, even at its most basic form. But if there is a creator, then yes, he could create life from dust, just as described in the Torah. Let's entertain both options. Either there's a creator who designed it all, or somehow, against all odds, lifeless particles organize themselves into complex living systems entirely by accident. Let's look at just one example, the human body. Take the eye. Even with all our technological advancements, no man-made camera comes close to matching the precision, sensitivity, and processing power of the human eye. But beyond the lens itself, look at where the eye is located. Why is it in the head and not, say, in the foot? If evolution were purely random, wouldn't it make sense for at least one eye to have ended up on a leg somewhere? But no, eyes are always placed exactly where they need to be. Not just functional, but protected. They're set inside the skull, in perfectly formed sockets. Imagine if the eye protruded. One punch, and you'd go blind. Instead, we have eyelids to clean and shield the eye, and eyelashes that protect it from dust. Even the eyebrows divert sweat from our foreheads, so it doesn't drip into our eyes and blur our vision. Why don't our ears have eyelids? Because ears don't need that kind of protection, but eyes do. Or take the nose. It sticks out so we can smell food before we eat it. If our nose were on our back, we'd never know if something was rotten. Smell is a critical part of our defense system. Teeth, the ones in front cut, the ones in back grind, precisely arranged. Ears? Scientists used to wonder why the ear even has that external ugly lump of cartilage. Why not just a hole in the head? Today we know. It's shaped to help us determine where sound is coming from. A guard at night hears a faint rustle. How does he instinctively know if it's coming from in front or behind? Because of the way sound waves enter the ear. The cartilage causes sound from the back to cast a subtle shadow. The brain interprets the difference. Every single part of the human body is a marvel of precision engineering. Even the appendix, long dismissed as useless, is now known to serve as a safe house for healthy bacteria during digestive infections. It plays a critical role in restoring gut health. Nothing is random. So I asked him, you understand all this. You see the complexity. You know how intricate and interdependent these systems are. So be honest. Which makes more sense to you? He paused, and he said, if I'm being honest, I don't believe this happened by itself. There must be some kind of higher intelligence, a designing force behind it all. And then he added, but I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist. I smiled and said, then we've just made a big step forward. You may not call it God, but you already believe in an intelligent force, a higher power with the ability to design and create. He nodded. I believe in a supreme intelligence, but I don't connect it to religion. And I told him, that's okay. Let's keep exploring, one step at a time. Because sometimes the journey to truth doesn't start with belief. It starts with wonder, with logic, with honesty. And when someone opens their mind just enough to consider design that points to a designer, that's already a powerful beginning. Up until now, You felt there was no designer, just randomness. But now you've admitted that you believe in a higher intelligence, a force greater than us that created everything. Not a person, not something we can see, but something real. And you said, yes, I agree 100%. There is a higher power. Great. That's a huge step forward. Now the next question is, who is this power? What does it want, if anything? Did it create the universe out of boredom, or does it have purpose, meaning direction? Let's take one step further. Judaism makes a bold and unique claim that the Torah was given directly by God to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai, not through a prophet, not in a dream, not to one individual in a cave, but to an entire nation in a public national revelation. That claim is unparalleled in human history, and there's evidence, strong, logical, and multi-layered. In seminars, there's a full lecture dedicated to this topic, the evidence that the Torah is divine. It usually takes place Friday morning, after participants have spent the night immersed in deeper questions. That session lays out clear proof models from fulfilled prophecies, scientific knowledge embedded in the Torah long before modern discovery, and encoded patterns that no human could have devised 3,000 years ago. And when you see how all of these elements come together, you start realizing this book couldn't have been written by a human being. It's too deep, too accurate, too timeless. It had to have come from a higher source. In the book Journey to the Truth, many of these proofs are compiled on prophecy, science, biblical codes, and more. And once you're convinced that the Creator also gave the Torah, now things really start to connect. Before, you believed there was a Creator, but you didn't know His name, His plan, or His purpose. But once you realize that He gave this book, and that it opens with the words, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth," suddenly you know who He is and what He wants from you. You realize this world isn't random. It was built for the purpose of good, to give, to uplift, to guide humanity toward meaning. That's what it means to be wise enough to listen to advice. It applies in everyday life, seeking direction and learning from others. But it also applies to the biggest questions of all. Why are we here? Is there life after death? Is there a moral path written by our Creator? A person who refuses to even ask these questions, who says, "I already know everything," is what King Solomon calls a fool. The way of the fool is right in his own eyes. He thinks he's always right, never stops to reflect. And where does that lead him in the end? Eventually he leaves this world and comes face to face with truth, and he's in shock. Suddenly, he sees there is judgment, there is purpose, and all the rewards he could have earned, he missed. All because he didn't want to explore even a 1% chance it might be true. That's something I often say to people who aren't interested in exploring faith. Let's say you're 99% sure religious people are wrong, but you admit there's even a 1% chance they're right. If there's just 1% chance that there's a Creator and a life after death and a moral code, don't you owe it to yourself to investigate? This isn't a small question. It's the most important question of your life. Go attend a seminar, listen to the lectures, ask questions, test the evidence, challenge the logic, grow, learn, think. Afterward, do whatever you want with the information. But first, get the information. Be what Solomon calls a wise person who listens to advice. And when someone chooses wisdom, not just knowledge, but real character development, something changes. Solomon tells us there are 3 levels: the fool, impulsive, self-justifying, blind to growth; the wise, someone who listens, reflects and grows; the discerning, someone who also masters his emotions and instincts. He doesn't just know the truth, he lives it. A person like that thrives in marriage, in parenting, in society. They live with inner peace, with purpose, and with strength. Their life becomes not just functional, but truly fulfilled. Let us conclude with a heartfelt blessing for everyone joining us, both here and watching from afar. May the Holy One, blessed be He, bless you all with abundant blessing, success, and the fulfillment of your heart's deepest wishes for good and for peace. May God protect the people of Israel and the soldiers of Israel wherever they may be, and may they all return home safely, healthy, and whole. We also acknowledge and warmly embrace the grandparents of the hostage, Eden Alexander Ben Yael, who are here with us. We dedicate this lesson to the protection, safety, and rescue of all the hostages. May they return to their homes swiftly, in body and in spirit, to good lives and to peace. Amen.